You need to leave, ma'am. Right now. The words echoed across the marble lobby of City Hall, sharp enough to turn heads and freeze conversations. For a brief moment, even the steady hum of morning activity seemed to disappear beneath the weight of that command. Danielle Brooks stopped walking. She did not look startled. She did not look angry. Instead, she slowly turned toward the voice, her expression calm, almost thoughtful, as if she had heard far worse things in life than a stranger deciding she did not belong. Sunlight streamed through the enormous glass panels above the entrance, painting long golden shapes across the polished floor. Staff members carrying folders paused near the security checkpoint. A local reporter lowered her phone halfway. Two interns standing beside a directory kiosk exchanged uncertain glances. Everyone could feel it. Something uncomfortable had entered the room. Officer Ryan Collins stood near the center of the lobby with his shoulders squared and his jaw set. His dark blue uniform looked perfectly pressed. The silver badge on his chest reflected the morning light. He had spent nearly 10 years working security assignments throughout the city, and he trusted his instincts more than anything. This morning, his instincts had already decided something. The woman standing 15 feet away from him did not belong at the high-profile policy meeting scheduled inside City Hall. At least, that was what he believed. Danielle looked around 60 years old. She wore a simple tan coat over a navy dress. No visible credentials hung around her neck. No assistant followed behind her. No security detail surrounded her. There was nothing about her appearance that screamed power. Nothing that announced importance. She looked like someone who could have been a retired schoolteacher, a librarian, or a grandmother visiting downtown for the day. Ryan took a step closer. "This area is restricted," he said firmly. "The conference level is for authorized guests only." Danielle studied him quietly. Her eyes moved briefly to the staircase behind him and then back again. "I understand," she replied. Her voice was smooth and measured. "I'm here for the meeting." Several people nearby exchanged looks. Ryan folded his arms. He had heard that answer before. City Hall attracted all kinds of visitors. Activists, tourists, curious residents. People who thought confidence alone could get them through secured doors. "Do you have an invitation?" he asked. Danielle smiled politely. "Someone is expecting me." A faint chuckle escaped from a man waiting near the information desk. Another person looked away awkwardly. Ryan remained unmoved. "I'll need documentation." Danielle reached into her coat pocket. For a second, Ryan expected her to produce an official badge or a printed credential. Instead, she removed a small folded photograph. She looked at it briefly before slipping it back into her pocket. The movement seemed oddly personal, almost nostalgic. "I'm afraid I don't carry invitations around," she said. "But I assure you, I'm supposed to be here." Ryan's patience began to thin. Around them, City Hall continued waking up. Elevator doors opened and closed. Shoes clicked against stone floors. Voices drifted through the vast atrium. Yet an invisible circle of attention had formed around the two of them. More people were watching now. Danielle noticed it. She could feel their curiosity, their assumptions, their quiet conclusions. She had felt those things before. Years ago, decades ago, long before anyone learned her name. Her gaze wandered toward a wall covered with framed photographs documenting the city's history. One image in particular caught her attention. An old black and white photograph showed a maintenance worker holding a mop beside the front entrance of the very building where she now stood. Danielle's eyes lingered on it for a moment. A warmth touched her expression before fading away. "Ma'am," Ryan's voice pulled her back. "I'm going to ask you one final time. Please step away from the restricted area." Danielle turned back toward him. The sunlight caught the silver strands in her hair. Her posture remained perfectly relaxed. No anger, no embarrassment, no fear, just patience. That calmness irritated Ryan more than he wanted to admit. Most people became defensive when challenged. Most people argued. Danielle simply stood there as though she already knew something everyone else did not. Somewhere above them, a clock chimed the hour. 9 o'clock. The sound drifted through the lobby and disappeared into silence. Danielle glanced toward the closed conference doors at the far end of the building. Then she looked back at Ryan and offered the smallest smile. "I think," she said softly, "it won't be much longer now." The lobby remained quiet after Danielle spoke. Not completely silent, but quieter than it had any right to be during the busiest hour of the morning. People continued moving through the building, yet many of them found reasons to slow down. A receptionist pretended to organize paperwork while watching from across the room. A maintenance worker paused beside a supply cart. Even the local reporter near the entrance kept glancing back toward the growing standoff. Officer Ryan Collins noticed the attention and disliked it immediately. Security situations became harder when spectators got involved. He preferred simple rules and quick resolutions. This woman, however, seemed determined to turn a routine interaction into something else. Danielle stood with her hands loosely folded in front of her coat. Her breathing was steady. Her eyes wandered once more toward the wall of historical photographs lining the marble corridor. The oldest images were faded around the edges. Mayors from decades past smiled beside community leaders. Construction crews posed proudly in front of half-finished projects. School children stood on courthouse steps holding tiny American flags. Most visitors walked past those photographs without noticing them. Danielle examined every frame as though she were revisiting old memories. In truth, she was. 28 years earlier, she had entered this same building through a side entrance before sunrise. Back then she was a college intern carrying borrowed notebooks and student debt that seemed impossible to escape. She remembered the smell of fresh floor wax. She remembered the nervous excitement of seeing local government operate from the inside. Most of all, she remembered the people nobody noticed. The custodians arriving before dawn. The cafeteria workers preparing breakfast. The clerks sorting paperwork long before public meetings began. Her father had taught her to pay attention to those people. Samuel Brooks spent 32 years working inside municipal buildings throughout the state. He often said that the character of a person revealed itself in how they treated those who could do nothing for them. Danielle had never forgotten that lesson. A faint smile crossed her face as she remembered him. Ryan noticed it. "Is something funny?" he asked. Danielle blinked and returned to the present. "No," she said gently. "Just remembering someone." Ryan shifted his weight. The answer only increased his frustration. Everything about her seemed calm. Too calm. He expected irritation by now. Maybe embarrassment. Instead, she looked completely comfortable standing in the middle of a situation most people would desperately try to escape. The large clock above the information desk ticked forward. 9:03. Behind the conference doors on the upper level, preparations for the morning meeting were undoubtedly underway. City officials, department heads, and invited guests had spent weeks preparing for it. The mayor himself was scheduled to make an announcement that reporters described as historic. Security around the building had been tighter than usual all week. Ryan took his responsibilities seriously, which was exactly why he could not understand why this woman refused to cooperate. Across the lobby, the reporter finally lifted her phone and quietly began recording. Danielle noticed the movement from the corner of her eye, but did not react. Public attention was not new to her. In fact, there had been a time when cameras followed her almost everywhere. Yet standing there now, she seemed more interested in the old photographs than the people watching her. Her gaze settled on another frame near the end of the hallway. This one showed a ribbon-cutting ceremony from nearly 20 years ago. Danielle remembered attending that event. Nobody in the lobby could have guessed it. Time had changed her appearance. Experience had added silver to her hair and patience to her voice. But she remembered every detail. The summer heat, the crowded sidewalks, the hopeful speeches. "Ma'am," Ryan's tone sharpened slightly. "I need you to either present identification or leave the area." Danielle turned toward him again. Morning sunlight reflected across the polished floor between them. "Officer Collins," she said. Ryan frowned. He had never introduced himself. For the first time that morning, uncertainty flickered across his face. Danielle glanced briefly at the name stitched above his uniform pocket. "You are doing your job," she continued. "And I respect that." The compliment caught him off guard. Before he could respond, elevator doors opened across the lobby. Several city employees stepped out carrying folders and tablets. Their hurried footsteps echoed through the building. Danielle looked toward the upper level where the conference room doors remained closed. Then she checked the clock once more. 9:05. Her expression softened almost imperceptibly. Whatever she had been waiting for seemed very close now. Officer Ryan Collins had built his career on certainty. Certainty kept people safe. Certainty prevented mistakes. Certainty allowed him to make decisions quickly when others hesitated. For nearly a decade, he had worked security assignments across government buildings, public events, and emergency operations centers. He had learned to read a room within seconds. At least, that was what he believed. Standing in the center of the City Hall lobby, Ryan studied Danielle Brooks again. The more he looked at her, the less she fit his expectations. Important people usually arrived surrounded by signs of importance. They carried credentials. They traveled with assistants. They moved with urgency. Danielle did none of those things. She stood quietly beneath the morning sunlight as though the attention surrounding her meant nothing at all. Ryan glanced toward the conference level. More guests had arrived over the last few minutes. Every one of them had checked in properly. Every one of them had produced identification without hesitation. Meanwhile, the woman standing in front of him continued offering calm answers that somehow revealed almost nothing. The growing audience around them only made the situation worse. He could feel eyes following every exchange. A pair of city employees whispered near the elevator bank. The reporter near the entrance was now openly recording. Even people passing through the building slowed their pace when they noticed the tension. Ryan disliked becoming the center of attention. Security worked best when nobody noticed it. Yet somehow this routine encounter had become the most interesting thing happening in the building. He straightened his shoulders. The longer this continued, the more convinced he became that he needed to end it. Danielle remained near the historical display wall, her gaze drifting occasionally toward the framed photographs. She seemed completely uninterested in challenging him. That should have reassured him. Instead, it made him uneasy. Most people argued when confronted. Most people became defensive. Danielle simply listened. The patience in her expression felt strangely powerful. Ryan could not explain why. His radio crackled softly against his shoulder. A brief update from another officer confirmed that all entrances remained secure. Ryan acknowledged the message and looked back at Danielle. "I am trying to help you avoid an unnecessary problem," he said. "If someone invited you, we can verify that. But I need something to work with." Danielle nodded slowly. "That sounds reasonable." Ryan waited. For a moment, he thought she might finally provide a name. Instead, her attention shifted toward a large window overlooking the city plaza outside. Morning traffic flowed steadily through downtown. Sunlight reflected from glass office towers several blocks away. The city looked alive and hopeful. Danielle watched it with a thoughtful expression. "This place has changed," she said quietly. Ryan frowned. "What place?" "The city." Her eyes remained fixed on the skyline. "The first time I came here, half those buildings did not exist." Ryan followed her gaze. He did not know how to respond. The comment felt oddly personal, almost intimate, as if she knew the city in a way most people never could. A young intern hurried through the lobby carrying a stack of folders. One slipped from her arms and scattered papers across the floor. Before anyone else reacted, Danielle stepped forward. She knelt carefully and helped gather the pages. The intern looked embarrassed. "Thank you," she said. Danielle handed the folders back with a warm smile. "You are welcome." The exchange lasted only seconds, yet several people nearby noticed it. Ryan noticed it too. Something about the interaction bothered him. Not because Danielle had done anything wrong, but because she seemed completely at ease helping a stranger despite the uncomfortable situation surrounding her. The intern rushed away. Danielle returned to her place near the display wall. Ryan checked the clock again. 9:10. The meeting upstairs should have started by now. Yet the conference room doors remained closed. That was unusual. Very unusual. He touched his earpiece and requested an update. The response came back almost immediately. The meeting had been delayed. No explanation given. Ryan lowered his hand. Delayed. The word lingered in his mind. Around the lobby, conversations grew quieter. Staff members glanced toward the upper floor more frequently. Something was happening behind those closed doors. Danielle seemed to sense it too. Her eyes lifted briefly toward the conference level. There was no anxiety in her expression. No impatience. If anything, she looked reassured. As though the delay confirmed something she had expected all along. Ryan felt a knot of uncertainty tighten inside his chest. He still believed he was right. He still believed she did not belong there. Yet the confidence he had felt 20 minutes earlier was beginning to fade around the edges. Danielle folded her hands again and stood beneath the golden light pouring through the glass ceiling. Then, almost to herself, she whispered, "They must be looking for me by now." Ryan stared at Danielle for several seconds after hearing her quiet remark. "They must be looking for me by now." The sentence sounded simple, almost casual, yet something about it settled heavily in the air between them. Around the lobby, the normal rhythm of City Hall continued, but the atmosphere felt different now. More people were paying attention. More eyes were drifting toward the woman standing beneath the sunlight and the officer standing in front of her. Ryan adjusted the radio on his shoulder. He wanted clarity. He wanted facts. Most of all, he wanted this situation resolved before it became a distraction. "Ma'am," he said, keeping his voice professional, "I need you to understand something. This is not personal. I have procedures to follow." Danielle nodded. "I know you do." Her answer was immediate, calm, respectful. It somehow made Ryan more uncomfortable than an argument would have. "Then help me understand why you are here," he said. "Give me a name. Give me a department. Give me something I can verify." Danielle looked toward the upper level once again. The conference room doors remained closed. A few staff members moved back and forth beyond the glass railing. Their pace looked hurried now, purposeful. She noticed it. Ryan noticed it too. "The person expecting me is busy," Danielle replied. "That is why I came early." Ryan exhaled slowly. The answer felt like another circle leading nowhere. Nearby, the reporter lowered her phone for a moment and whispered something to a cameraman who had just arrived through the front entrance. The story had become interesting enough to attract company. Ryan could feel pressure building. Every minute this continued, more people watched. More people formed opinions. More people waited to see what happened next. He stepped slightly closer. "Without credentials, I cannot allow access." Danielle met his eyes. "I never asked for access." The response caught him off guard. "What? I am already where I need to be." For the first time all morning, several people openly reacted. A few exchanged puzzled looks. One city employee frowned. Another quietly laughed under his breath. Ryan felt irritation rise inside him. Not because Danielle was being rude. She was not. The problem was that every answer she gave sounded strangely confident, as if she knew the outcome of this conversation before it happened. Ryan glanced toward the information desk. The receptionist there suddenly received a phone call. He watched her expression change almost immediately. She sat straighter, said something quickly, then looked toward the conference level. Ryan noticed the reaction but could not hear the conversation. Something was happening. He could feel it, yet he still had no explanation. Danielle folded her hands in front of her coat and remained perfectly composed. The sunlight from the glass ceiling illuminated the silver strands in her hair. For a brief moment, Ryan found himself wondering who she really was. Not because of credentials or titles, because of the way she carried herself. He had seen elected officials panic under less pressure. He had seen executives become angry when challenged. Danielle displayed neither reaction. The clock above the lobby moved to 9:15. Suddenly Ryan's radio crackled again. This time the voice sounded urgent. "Collins, status update." Ryan pressed the transmit button. "Situation under control. Has the guest been located?" Ryan frowned. "What guest?" A brief pause followed. Then static interrupted the reply before the connection dropped completely. Ryan lowered his hand slowly. His pulse quickened. "Guest? What guest?" Before he could request clarification, another security officer emerged from a side corridor and approached at a fast walk. The younger officer stopped beside him and spoke quietly. "Operations says someone important has not checked in yet." Ryan looked toward Danielle almost instinctively. The younger officer followed his gaze. "You think it is her?" Ryan immediately shook his head. "No," yet the certainty in his voice sounded weaker than he intended. The younger officer hesitated. "Maybe we should verify before escalating." Ryan remained silent. Escalating. The word lingered. He had already spent nearly 20 minutes trying to identify this woman. 20 minutes during which she had remained calm, while everyone else grew increasingly tense. Across the lobby, the receptionist suddenly stood from her chair. She looked toward the conference level again, then toward Danielle, then back toward the conference level. Her eyes widened. Ryan noticed that too. One by one, small signs began appearing everywhere. Glances, reactions, whispers, pieces of information moving through the building faster than he could understand. Danielle simply watched the staircase leading upstairs. Her expression softened slightly, almost as though she recognized something approaching. Then, from beyond the closed conference doors above, a wave of movement swept through the upper hallway. Staff members appeared. Reporters shifted position. Conversations stopped. And for the first time that morning, every instinct Ryan trusted began telling him that he might have made a very serious mistake. The lobby seemed to hold its breath. Conversations that had filled the building only minutes earlier faded into scattered whispers. Every eye drifted toward the upper level, where movement continued behind the glass railing. Staff members appeared one after another, speaking urgently into phones and headsets. Reporters adjusted camera angles. City employees stepped aside as though making room for someone important. Ryan Collins watched it all unfold with growing unease. Years of experience had taught him how to recognize moments when circumstances shifted beyond his control. This felt exactly like one of those moments. Yet he still did not understand why. Danielle Brooks remained where she was, standing quietly beside the historical display wall. The same calm expression rested on her face. The same patience. The same certainty that had unsettled Ryan from the beginning. Around them, the crowd had grown larger. People arriving through the main entrance slowed when they sensed something unusual. Questions spread through the lobby faster than answers. Who was the woman? Why had security stopped her? Why was the meeting delayed? Nobody seemed to know. The uncertainty only fueled curiosity. Ryan checked his radio again. More messages. More fragmented information. None of it provided clarity. Then another call came through. Collins, report immediately. Status on the missing guest. Ryan pressed the transmit button, still attempting identification. Silence followed. Then a voice answered, sharper this time. You still have not identified the guest? Before Ryan could respond, the transmission ended. A knot tightened in his stomach. Nearby, the younger officer shifted nervously. Maybe we should. Contact administration directly, he suggested. Ryan nodded reluctantly. It was becoming difficult to ignore the possibility that something larger was happening. Across the lobby, the receptionist suddenly hurried out from behind her desk carrying a tablet. She approached another employee, showed him the screen, and both immediately looked toward Danielle. The employee's eyes widened. A second later, he hurried away toward the staircase. Ryan saw the exchange. So did several reporters. The atmosphere changed again. The tension was no longer centered on a disagreement between security and a visitor. It had become anticipation. Something was coming. Danielle noticed the shifting energy, but remained composed. Her gaze settled briefly on the photograph of the maintenance worker hanging nearby. Samuel Brooks. Her father. She remembered walking through this building with him as a child. He used to point toward elected officials passing through hallways and remind her that titles never mattered more than character. The building belongs to the people, he often said. Never let anyone convince you that dignity requires permission. The memory brought a faint warmth to her eyes. Ryan noticed that too. He could not understand how someone under so much scrutiny could appear so peaceful. Most people would have demanded explanations by now. Most people would have become frustrated. Danielle had done neither. Instead, she stood quietly while the entire building seemed to orbit around a mystery she never bothered to explain. The clock moved to 9:20. Suddenly, the conference room doors on the upper floor opened. Not slightly, fully. A wave of activity followed. Staff members emerged first, then communications aides. Then reporters positioned themselves along the railing overlooking the lobby below. Camera lenses pointed downward. Microphones appeared. The crowd instinctively turned toward the staircase. Ryan felt his heartbeat quicken. Whatever had delayed the meeting was ending. The younger officer beside him straightened immediately. Something is happening, he whispered. Ryan did not answer. His attention remained fixed on the upper level. More officials appeared. Near the conference entrance. Department directors. Senior advisors. Faces he recognized from countless city events. None of them looked relaxed. Several scanned the lobby as though searching for someone. One by one, their eyes landed on Danielle. And one by one, their expressions changed. Confusion gave way to relief. Relief gave way to urgency. Ryan felt the blood drain from his face. He followed their line of sight. Danielle stood exactly where she had been all morning. Quiet, patient, waiting. A communications director suddenly hurried toward the staircase. Another official followed. They moved quickly now, descending toward the lobby floor. Reporters leaned forward. Cameras tracked every step. Around Ryan, conversations disappeared completely. Even the sound of footsteps seemed distant. Danielle looked up toward the approaching officials. For the first time that morning, a genuine smile appeared on her face. Not a triumphant smile, not a vindictive one. Simply the smile of someone recognizing familiar faces. Ryan swallowed hard. Every assumption he had made since 9 o'clock began collapsing under the weight of what he was seeing. The officials were not approaching him. They were not heading toward the security desk. They were heading directly toward the woman he had spent the last 20 minutes questioning. And judging by the expressions on their faces, she was not merely expected. She was the person everyone had been waiting for. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The entire lobby seemed suspended between uncertainty and revelation. Sunlight poured through the glass ceiling, washing the marble floor in pale gold. Dust particles drifted lazily through the beams of light. Somewhere near the entrance, a revolving door turned slowly. The sound felt strangely distant. Danielle Brooks stood quietly beneath the historical display wall while a group of senior officials descended the staircase toward her. Their footsteps echoed softly across the vast atrium. Ryan Collins remained frozen where he stood. His training told him to assess the situation. His instincts told him something important was happening, yet neither could explain the calm certainty radiating from the woman he had spent most of the morning questioning. The officials moved quickly but respectfully. No panic, no confusion, just urgency mixed with relief. Danielle watched them approach with the expression of someone greeting old colleagues after a long journey. Around the lobby, reporters adjusted camera settings. Employees stepped aside. Conversations disappeared entirely. The silence felt larger than the room itself. Ryan suddenly became aware of every small sound around him. The ticking clock above the information desk, the faint hum of the air conditioning system, the soft rustle of paper as someone lowered a folder. Details he would normally ignore now seemed impossibly loud. The lead official reached the bottom of the staircase and slowed. A woman from the communications office followed close behind. Both wore expressions Ryan had only seen when high-ranking dignitaries arrived unexpectedly. Neither looked annoyed. Neither looked surprised. Instead, they looked relieved that a problem had finally been solved. Danielle took a slow breath. Her eyes drifted briefly toward the photograph of her father one last time. Samuel Brooks stood frozen in black and white beneath a caption that most visitors never bothered to read. She remembered him arriving home after long shifts. She remembered the smell of floor polish on his work gloves. She remembered him telling her that respect should never depend on clothing, titles, or appearances. Those lessons had guided her through every stage of her life. Through college, through public service, through campaigns, through victories and failures, through moments when people underestimated her before she even spoke. Standing in City Hall once again, she realized how little some things had changed. Yet she felt no bitterness, only perspective. Ryan watched her gaze linger on the photograph. For the first time all morning, he wondered what story stood behind the woman before him. Not her credentials, not her purpose for being there. Her story. The realization arrived unexpectedly. He knew absolutely nothing about her. He had spent nearly half an hour making assumptions while never asking the question that mattered most. Who was she? The communications director finally reached Danielle and offered a respectful smile. The exchange was quiet enough that Ryan could not hear every word. But he caught enough. "We have been trying to find you." Danielle smiled warmly. "I noticed." The woman laughed softly, relief visible on her face. Another official joined them. Then another. Their body language said everything. Respect, familiarity, professional courtesy. Ryan felt his stomach tighten. The younger officer beside him shifted uncomfortably. Neither man spoke. Across the lobby, even the reporters appeared hesitant now. They sensed the answer approaching but had not fully grasped it yet. Danielle remained remarkably calm. She did not draw attention to herself. She did not mention the misunderstanding. She did not glance toward Ryan with satisfaction. Instead, she listened as the officials spoke and occasionally nodded. The humility of that reaction unsettled Ryan more than anger would have. If she truly held influence, she was making no effort to display it. The clock advanced another minute. 9:23. The morning light continued to spill across the floor, illuminating the old photographs and polished stone. Danielle looked upward toward the conference level. Her eyes softened. She had spent decades serving communities across the state. She had attended countless meetings, delivered countless speeches. Yet moments like this always reminded her why leadership mattered. Not because of authority, because of responsibility. Nearby, Ryan lowered his gaze briefly. A quiet realization had begun taking shape inside him. Whatever happened next, the situation was no longer about access badges, security procedures, or delayed meetings. It was about judgment, about assumptions, About the stories people invent when they decide they already know who belongs in a room. The officials suddenly stepped aside as another figure emerged at the top of the staircase. A familiar figure, one recognized by every employee, reporter, and visitor in the building. The moment he appeared, the atmosphere shifted again. Heads turned. Cameras lifted. Conversations vanished completely. Danielle looked up, toward the staircase. The man smiled the instant he saw her. And as he began descending toward the lobby, Ryan felt certainty disappear from beneath his feet. The moment Mayor Michael Thornton appeared at the top of the staircase, the entire building seemed to shift around him. Conversations disappeared. Camera lenses rose in perfect unison. Staff members instinctively stepped aside. Morning sunlight reflected against the glass railing as he descended toward the lobby with a pace that was quick but unmistakably focused. Ryan Collins recognized the mayor immediately, of course. Everyone did. Yet something about the mayor's expression caught him off guard. Michael Thornton was smiling. Not the practiced smile he used during press conferences. Not the diplomatic smile reserved for public events. This was genuine relief. The kind of expression someone wears after finally finding a person they have been searching for. Ryan felt his pulse quicken. The mayor reached the final step and moved directly through the crowd. He did not stop for reporters. He did not acknowledge questions. He did not pause for city officials attempting to speak with him. His attention remained fixed on one person, Danielle Brooks. The lobby fell completely silent as he approached her. Then, to Ryan's astonishment, the mayor extended both hands. "Governor Brooks," he said warmly. "There you are. We have been waiting for you." For a brief second, nobody reacted. The words seemed almost too large to process. Governor Brooks. The title hung in the air like a bell after a single strike. Then reality crashed into the room all at once. Gasps echoed from different corners of the lobby. Reporters exchanged stunned looks. The receptionist's hand flew to her mouth. The younger officer beside Ryan froze completely. "Governor." Ryan felt the word hit him with physical force. His gaze snapped toward Danielle, toward the woman he had questioned, toward the woman he had doubted, toward the woman he had spent nearly 30 minutes treating as someone who did not belong. Danielle smiled gently and shook the mayor's hand. "Good morning, Michael," she said. Her voice remained exactly the same. Calm, unhurried, humble. Nothing about her changed because the title had been spoken aloud. That realization somehow made the moment even more powerful. She had been the same person all morning. The only thing that had changed was everyone else's understanding. Flashing camera lights began reflecting across the marble walls. Reporters suddenly moved closer, careful but eager. Questions started forming before anyone could ask them. Ryan stood motionless. His thoughts raced through every interaction of the morning. Every assumption, every conclusion, every moment he had looked at her simple coat and ordinary appearance and decided she could not possibly belong there. The memory felt unbearable now. Mayor Thornton laughed softly. "You managed to arrive without half the building recognizing you." Danielle glanced around the lobby. Apparently not everyone. Several nearby officials smiled nervously. Others looked away. Ryan wished he could disappear entirely. Yet Danielle's eyes never sought him out. There was no triumph in her expression. No desire to embarrass anyone. She simply stood there speaking with the mayor as though the misunderstanding were insignificant. The humility of it left Ryan speechless. One reporter finally gathered enough courage to speak. "Governor Brooks, were you delayed this morning?" Danielle considered the question. Then she smiled. "Not exactly." A ripple of restrained laughter moved through the crowd. Even the mayor shook his head with amusement. The tension that had gripped the building all morning began dissolving. Yet for Ryan, the moment only grew heavier. He looked toward the historical photographs lining the wall. Suddenly he understood why she had spent so much time studying them. Why she had seemed connected to the building long before anyone knew who she was. She did belong here. More than most people in the room. The mayor gestured toward the conference level. "Everyone is ready upstairs." Danielle nodded. "Then we should not keep them waiting." As they prepared to leave, her eyes briefly settled on the photograph of Samuel Brooks. The old maintenance worker stood frozen in black and white beneath decades of history. Danielle's smile softened. The mayor followed her gaze and immediately understood. "Your father would be proud," he said quietly. Danielle took a slow breath. "I hope so." For a moment, the noise of the crowd seemed to fade away again. Just sunlight, marble floors, history hanging on the walls. Then the spell broke as cameras resumed clicking and officials began moving toward the staircase. The meeting could finally begin. But before taking a single step, Danielle turned slightly. Her eyes met Ryan's for the first time since the mayor had spoken her title. Ryan felt every mistake of the morning reflected back at him. Yet what he found in her expression was not anger, not disappointment, not judgment. It was something far more difficult to face. Understanding. The lobby slowly came back to life, but Ryan Collins remained rooted to the same spot. Around him, officials began moving toward the staircase. Reporters hurried to keep pace. Staff members exchanged astonished whispers. Yet all of it felt distant. The only thing Ryan could focus on was the brief moment when Danielle Brooks had looked at him. There had been no anger in her eyes. No satisfaction. No resentment. Just understanding. Somehow that made everything harder. Ryan had spent years believing that experience protected him from mistakes like this. He trusted his judgment. Trusted his ability to read situations quickly. Yet standing in the middle of City Hall, he realized how little he had actually seen. He had noticed a simple coat. Ordinary shoes. No visible credentials. He had noticed what was missing. He had never bothered to ask what might be present beneath the surface. A few feet away, the younger officer shifted nervously. "Ryan," he said quietly, "you could not have known." Ryan did not answer. The words offered no comfort. Because part of him knew that was not entirely true. He could have known more. He could have asked better questions. He could have listened. Instead, he had relied on assumptions. Across the lobby, Danielle prepared to follow Mayor Thornton toward the conference level. Several officials gathered around her, discussing schedules and briefing materials. She listened attentively, occasionally nodding. Despite being the most important person in the building that morning, she treated every conversation with the same patience she had shown throughout the entire ordeal. Then something unexpected happened. One of the mayor's senior advisors approached quickly with a concerned expression. "Governor," he said, lowering his voice, "there is already discussion about what happened this morning." Danielle glanced toward Ryan. The advisor continued. "The press is asking questions. Human Resources has been notified. There will likely be recommendations regarding disciplinary action." Several nearby officials exchanged looks. The implication was obvious. Ryan felt his stomach drop.